Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to stick to Sweden, and we're also going to stick to my home county of Skåne here in the very south of the country. For this review we will return to a brewery that has featured on the channel many a time before. I've had many nice beers from these guys over the years. They really made their name when it came to the kind of New England hazy IPAs and the big fruity IPAs as well, but more recently they've been doing a few more kind of pastry orientated beers, some really big sweet Berliner Weisses and Goses and stuff like this, and also some big pastry stouts, and it's one of those that we're going to have a look at today. And I have to say I'm quite curious to see how this beer turns out. So for this one then we are going to go up to the northwest corner of Skåne to Helsingborg, which is a very nice city and I would recommend you go and check it out. But we're going to have a look at another beer from Brewski Mikrobryggeri. So this particular beer is called the Licorice Vanilla Cake. It comes in at 12% ABV. It's part of their cake series of Imperial pastry stouts that they've been doing, and I'm very curious to see what this beer has in store for us. This beer was released as part of the Loka Småskalig assortment through Systembolaget here in Sweden. I can't remember whether this one was released as part of the December 2020, January 2021 or February 2021 release. I honestly can't remember because I have a little bit of a stockpile of Swedish beers at the moment, but it was one of those three that it was released as part of. But yeah, 12% Imperial pastry stout. This one, really curious to see how it turns out, and hopefully this is another interesting beer for them. I've really been enjoying the pie series over the last little while. The last beer I reviewed from the cake series, which was the almond walnut caramel vanilla cake or vanilla caramel cake, I forget which way around it was. That one was quite interesting. It wasn't quite as sweet as I remember some of the other ones in this series being, so I have to say I am quite curious to see what direction this one takes, because the pastry stouts, some of them can be a little bit sort of drier and things, whereas some of them can be really kind of big and oaty and sweet. So yeah, we'll see what direction this one takes. But regardless, very curious to see how it turns out. Always nice to review new beers from Brewski, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. This is another one of a few Brewski beers that you'll be seeing me review over February and March of 2021. So yeah, let's go for it then. So as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Brewski Mikrobryggeri before, and you will no doubt see more added to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to, and as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Brewski Mikrobryggeri then, on to my brewery notes. So as I've mentioned to you already, Brewski Mikrobryggeri are based in Helsingborg here in Skåne, in the very south of Sweden, and the company was founded back in 2014, and they're probably the best known Skånsk craft brewery these days. I know that they're probably the most widely exported Skånsk craft brewery at the moment, and they might be one of the bigger by volume producers, come to think of it as well. It's either these guys or Breakeriet who would, you know, hold the title of being the most well-known and most widely distributed Skånsk brewery. But anyway, the founders of this company are Marcus Hjalmarsson, Johan Britsen, Alfred Olsen and Robin Skoglund, and all of these guys were largely inspired by the West Coast American craft beers. But Marcus was originally associated with the High Nose brand of beer, which was brewed at the Höganäs Brewery out in the Kullaberg Peninsula to the northwest of Helsingborg. Very beautiful part of Sweden, by the way, which I would recommend you check out. But some of those beers in the High Nose brand are still brewed out there, and Brewski were brewing some of their beers out there originally, but they're now all brewed at their own facility in Helsingborg, which you'll find in the old train yard to the south of the central station. And this brewery has the capacity to brew around 100,000 litres of beer per month. In 2016, They started their own beer festival called Brewski, which started with over 40 different breweries, and it's continued to expand year on year. I first went to it in 2017, and I think there was about 60 brewers that year, and I've been in 2018 and 2019 as well, and it was great. I would recommend you go to that, one of the best beer festivals in Scandinavia. Unfortunately, in 2020, it was cancelled because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but fingers crossed it goes ahead again this year in 2021. But they also used to open up their brewery once a month as a bar, and they called it Brewski, but they now have their own bar in the city which goes by the same name, and this opened back in 2018, and I would recommend that you check that out as well. I do need to get up there and film an out and about video there and let you have a little look at it, but they've got some really nice ramen there. It's not authentic Japanese ramen, it's an American chef that cooks it, but you get chicken and pork ramen and stuff, and I think it is really nice, so I would recommend that you check that place out. I really enjoyed the ramen when I was there, actually. But these days they are also brewing some of their beers at Tampa Bay Brewing Company over in Florida in America, and mainly the IPAs. I think the stouts and the Berliner Weisses and stuff are actually imported over there, but they're also looking to open up a bar in Oslo up in Norway these days, and Marcus has a distribution company in Norway called Brewski, which is importing some of the Swedish beers up there. I'm not sure if those are going into Vinmonopolet yet, but maybe that's something for the future. I know that they're going to a few different bars in and around the Oslo area, but it would be quite cool if he brings some of the Norwegian beers the other way as well, actually. But over the course of 2019, these guys produced 500,000 litres of beer in the year. I'm not sure if they managed to expand that over 2020 with the whole COVID-19 pandemic and things, but they do have the capacity to brew quite a little bit more than that. But as of February 2021, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 325 different kinds of beer according to Untappd, and you will get some very nice beers from them. Probably the most famous beers from these guys would be the Feber series, the big fruity hazy IPAs. Those are definitely worth checking out, and those are probably the oldest beers that these guys still do. One of my favourite beers was always the Conan Double IPA. I thought that was just so well done. I really enjoyed that one. But these days, as I say, they're brewing a few different things. They've got their pie series, which are Berliner Weisses, and then they've got the cake series, which are these kind of big pastry stouts, actually. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Brewski Mikrobryggeri for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can of course check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's get on and actually have a taste of this beer then. So I'll just let you have a little look at the artwork on the can before we open it up. As you can see, it's quite similar to the artwork we've seen from Brewski previously. If we tip the can on its side like this, you can see there's the little Brewski man. There you can see him there. And you can see the pant signs as well for both Sweden and Norway. But yeah, it looks very nice, this one. Like I said, this one is a 12% Imperial Stout, Licorice vanilla cake. I don't know if I've ever had a cake quite like this, but you know, the Swedes, and I don't know if it's right to say the Danes and the Norwegians as well, but Licorice is very popular in Sweden at least, and I'm guessing across the whole of Scandinavia. But yeah, I never liked Licorice before I came here, but it has in fairness grown on me over the last time I've been here. The one thing that's always surprised me about Sweden, you see the amount of candy and you know the amount of sweets and sugar and stuff that they consume. You just wonder how there's not more diabetics in Sweden. But yeah, like I said, this beer was released as part of the Lokala Småskaligt assortment through Systembolaget here in Sweden. I can't remember if this was December 2020, January or February of 2021. I can't remember exactly when I got this beer, but regardless, 12% Imperial Pastry Stout, 330ml can. I think I paid in the region of 50 Swedish kroners for this, so that will be €5, about £4.50 sterling, and maybe about $5.50 American. So yeah, just to give you some currency conversions. But yeah, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. I'm curious to see what this has in store for us, and I'm curious to see, one, how oily this is because of the licorice. The Swedes, they love like big, powerful licorice beers like this. So you have to be aware, if you get a licorice beer from Sweden, it's going to be pretty intense on the licorice, just because that's how the Swedish palate is kind of geared in my experience. But yeah, I do like how this one I do like some of these Licorice beers. I've had some really nice ones in recent times. So as you can see, just before it fades away, this beer has poured with about a 1/3 finger of a frothy, I would say kind of medium beige head on this one. You can just look at that there. It's got a nice medium beige head there. That's fading away very quickly though to just be a very thin foamy layer and a slightly kind of thicker foamy ring around the edge of the glass. There's one or two big bubbles sticking towards the edge of it there though, but overall it does look pretty damn nice. I mean, if we shine the light through this beer, there is a little bit of a kind of Coca-Cola, Pepsi coloured edge to it, which is to be expected from an Imperial Stout, but in terms of its colour, black, ebony, rosewood kind of thing, and that is, as I say, exactly what you would expect from an Imperial Stout. Remember, the colour of your beers is dependent on 1, the type of malts that they use, 2, the length of the wort boil. The longer you boil the beer, the more the sugars caramelise, thus you get a darker colour out of the beer. But of course, it's dependent in the first instance on exactly what type of malts that you use. Adjuncts, of course, can play a role in that as well. And I suspect that this beer will probably have like flavour essence in it. That's probably what they've done with this. But yeah, it certainly looks the part of an Imperial Stout. Nothing particularly surprising about this one. And I should say this one has oats in it. This is an oat-based Imperial Stout actually. So yeah. Looks quite interesting, I have to say, but you know, nothing particularly surprising about this beer in terms of its appearance when you consider what style it is. Let's take a closer look at the aroma and just see how we get on then. Yeah, it's pretty much just on the aroma, it's pretty much as it kind of says on the can. It's licorice, it's vanilla, and it's cake. So yeah, this one for me, it smells like, the cake smells like really quite thick and almost kind of brownie-like in a sense. In the last one I reviewed in this series, it was quite sort of pastry-like. It was, you know, you could smell the pastriness, you could smell the sponge, and it had a little bit of dryness to it. This one smells a little bit more kind of rounded, but maybe it's just, you know, I've always found licorice to be quite sort of oily in a lot of ways. Licorice strikes me as a very kind of oily aroma, and maybe that's that. Like, licorice is a very kind of powerful component in a beer. It's a very powerful adjunct and it can dominate flavour and aroma. So I wonder if that's what's going on here. Maybe this beer might taste quite a bit different from how it it kind of comes across in the aroma. So I like that about this beer. Yeah, the fruity side, I mean, the fruity side of this beer is quite interesting as well, but we'll come to that later. But yeah, the base of this beer, as I say, it's got a nice, how would you say, it's got a nice sort of brownie, cakey sort of thing to it. As I say, that's the kind of backbone of this beer. You can get a little bit of the kind of dry pastry, crisp sort of thing. You can get a sort of dry pastry, crispy sort of thing to it, but it's mainly a kind of brownie sort of thing. It's not like a kind of spongy cake in a sense. So I do like how that side of this beer, I do like how that side of the beer goes together as well. So yeah, it's interesting for sure. But it comes across like a kind of vanilla sponge with like a licorice oil in it. That's how this beer really comes across. It's quite a straight shooting beer in a lot of ways. You know, there's a wee bit of like a sweet kind of milky chocolate to it. Yeah, definitely a bit of a kind of sweet milky kind of chocolate, you know, 30-40%, 30-40% cocoa, something like that. And that's the vanilla that's going to give you the impression of it being a more milky chocolate rather than a darker, higher cocoa chocolate. You've got that soft kind of spongy note, like I say, although it does have a wee bit more of a kind of brownie element to it as well, a thicker brownie. But the vanilla, I think, is giving you a nice kind of vanilla spongy quality. There's one or two little woody elements to the beer, and then you can smell the licorice oil just kind of infused throughout that. So yeah, I really like how all of this, I really like how everything goes together in this one. The aroma of this beer is actually very, very nice. Like I say, it's quite straight shooting. I find this one a little bit less complex than the last one I had within this series, but I think it's going to work out, you know, quite nicely, to be honest with you. There's one or two little nutty elements in there, but, you know, vanilla sponge, licorice oil, bit of milky chocolate, and you can smell a bit of the kind of pastry sort of dryness to it as well. It's an interesting smelling beer, this one, for sure. I would say there's quite a few little interesting elements to this one. So yeah, that's the malty kind of adjuncty side of the beer. The hoppy side of things, and this was interesting because in the last beer, it didn't actually, it was quite interesting, and it's done the same again here. So it says here that in Swedish Danish it contains corn malt, havre, råg, Licorice, so it's got oats and rye in it. And it says the same in English, barley, oat, rye. But if you look at the Italian, it says lupulo, which is hops. I'm not so good with Spanish, so I'm not sure. But it says Hopfen in German as well, actually, and it also says wheat. It also says wheat in German as well, which it doesn't say in English. So maybe they need to check their translations, actually, because there's a few things here in it says houblon in French as well, which is hops. So I think Brewski, if someone from the brewery is watching, they need to have a look at the translations that are on the can, because it's saying some things in some languages that are not consistent with the other ones. So in English and Swedish, it's saying there's no hops in this beer, whereas in some of the other languages, Italian, German, French, it is saying it. So they need to sort that out on these cans, because it's, you know, I like it is a common thing with some Berliner Weisses and stuff like that. Quite a few Swedish breweries don't use hops in some of these big sweet Berliner Weisses. In the pastry stouts, I would have thought that they would use the hops, but quite a few breweries again don't. And when it comes to the aroma of this beer, when it comes to the aroma of the beer itself, it's you know, it kind of is what you'd expect in that sense too. I mean, it's how do you say, it's got a little bit of earthiness to it. There is a wee bit of a kind of floral note to it and a little touch of grassiness, but those notes seem almost negligible in a sense. It does seem a bit negligible, to be honest with you. So it's hard to tell if there's hops in this, but I suspect there isn't. I suspect that there isn't hops in this, so they need to check their translations, definitely. But yeah, on the fruity side of things, there's not too much to report there. There's a wee bit of a figgy note, a wee bit of black currant, and maybe a slightly more oily blackberry thing going on with the beer as well. But yeah, it strikes me as quite a straight shooting aroma in a few ways. So yeah, take a little bit of time to ponder that over with this one before you get stuck into it. But we are going to taste this beer now and see how we get on. So let's go for it. So this one is the Licorice Vanilla Cake, an Imperial pastry stout coming in at 12% ABV from Brewski Mikrobryggeri in Helsingborg in Skåne here in the south of Sweden. Let's get stuck in. Slange, skål, cheers. Ooh. Now that is pretty nice, actually. I like that. I'm going to say straight away, this beer comes across as a lot more, it is quite straight shooting. I will say it's quite straight shooting, but it just comes off as a lot more rounded than the almond, walnut, caramel, vanilla caramel, whatever it was, cake came off as. That beer almost came across as just a wee bit kind of confused, if you like. But it's interesting because I suspect, you know, that sort of pastry kind of note you're getting out of this beer, I suspect that that's the rye that's giving it that, because you can feel, with this one, you can just feel a bit of a kind of grainy, brown bready, rye pastry sort of thing in this beer. I do like that. It's very clever, come to think of it. But yeah, for me, this is a return to form for Brewski on the kind of pastry stouts. I like this one. And the thing as well is, the licorice isn't too powerful. The licorice isn't too powerful in this one. So yeah, this is interesting, definitely an interesting beer from Brewski. But I'm going to say straight away, thumbs up to them for this. I think they've pulled off another kind of solid one here. This cake series is definitely an interesting one to watch. But yeah, let's try and break down the flavour of this then. But first impressions, Nicely done beer, and a bit more rounded than the last one we had in this series for sure. Yeah. So yeah, let's do that then. So in the middle third of your palate, you've got a nice little bit of a grainy rye sort of base to it. That kind of forms the base of the middle layer in this beer, and I do really like how that pieces together in this one. On top of that, you start to get some more of the kind of cakey notes out of the beer. You can feel that sort of soft, white, spongy note in there. It's like a vanilla sponge that sits on top of that kind of rye edge that the beer has. And it's interesting how the on the border regions in this beer, the middle third of your palate, if you go to the front, between the front and middle third of your palate, then between the middle and back third of your palate, that's where the licorice comes out for me. You've got a really intense kind of licoricey, oily quality just sitting in there. And I do like how that kind of lingers there, because you've really got a nice just smoothness to the beer and kind of sweetness from the sort of vanilla sponge in the middle of the palate. So this one's got a really interesting way of going about its business. It's definitely fair to say that. And it's interesting as well because in the aroma you can detect some really chocolatey kind of notes to this beer, like a nice milky chocolate, but it doesn't come out so much in the it really doesn't come out so much in the flavour, to be honest with you. So that's an interesting point about this beer as well. Yeah, this one's interesting for sure. I think maybe in fairness you do get a wee bit of a milky chocolatey quality coming out of the beer in the centre of the palate and the aftertaste. It does, in fairness, I think in the very centre of your palate you can feel a little bit of an oily, sweet, licoricey sort of thing developing the further you go into the aftertaste. It's difficult to. This is one of these beers where it's kind of difficult to keep track of. Like, as I say, in the middle third of your palate, you've got a base of that sort of rye, brown bready kind of thing in it that tastes a little bit like pastry. On top of that, you've got like a soft vanilla sponge, and on either side of that, you've got a more oily, licoricey kind of note. But then on top of that, again, it feels like you have a little bit of it feels like you have a little bit of it feels like you have a little bit of a kind of more oily, it feels like you've got a little bit more of a kind of oily, licoricey quality going in there too. So it's really interesting how all of this pieces together, to be honest with you. Yeah, this beer's pretty interesting for sure. I mean, I really like how everything kind of just fits together in this one. It's quite straight shooting. It's certainly there are little woody and nutty undertones to this beer, but I find this one remarkably straight shooting compared to some of the other beers I've had in this series from Brewski, and I think that works for it. I think that's one of the reasons why it feels so well rounded, to be honest. But yeah, if you go into that back third of your palate, again, you get a wee bit of a kind of rye, brown bready sort of thing. So you get a bit of a spongy character again in that back third of your palate, and it feels a bit thicker. So you can definitely get some more darker, cakey elements to this beer, for sure. So yeah, it's a really interesting. It's really interesting how this beer just like pieces itself together. Absolutely. It's again, as I say, I don't think there's too much more to say on this one because it is so straight shooting. Yeah, the spongy cake in the back third of your palate is definitely a little bit more of a kind of like brown spongy note, and maybe it's got a wee kind of cocoa hint to it as well, come to think of it. But yeah, in the middle third of your palate, it's more vanilla spongy, kind of more licoricey and things. And I really like how that pieces itself together. The malty adjuncty side of this beer, I think, is pretty damn nice. So yeah, it's interesting how that goes together for sure. I like this one. In terms of the in terms of the hoppy side of the beer. And as I said, I'm quite confused as to whether there are hops in this, and I suspect from the flavour there's not. But you do get a wee touch of earthiness in the back corners of the palate. It's a wee bit herbal as you move further forward. Then maybe there is a little touch of kind of floral aromaticity on the front corners of the palate too, but that could well just be placebo effect. You know, you're used to these things being there. But then round the front curve of the palate, the beer's a little bit lighter and sort of grassier in a sense, definitely. And yeah, so the green component of the beer, I think, is quite interesting for sure. It is quite an interesting beer from that sense too. But yeah, in terms of the fruity side of things, let's focus on that front third of your palate then. So yeah, front third of your palate, you have a really nice kind of so the base of the beer is quite interesting. So yeah, front third of your palate, as I say, in that border region you get a wee bit of an oily, licoricey sort of thing, but there is a bit of a kind of more grainy, rye, cakey sponge sort of thing. Underneath the front third of your palate, there is a wee bit of just a kind of rye bready sort of note, a wee bit of a kind of licoricey type thing as well. And yeah, I do like how that side of the beer goes together too. But yeah, on the fruity side of things, what can we say about the fruity side of this beer? So yeah, when you take it in, it's got a really nice kind of, there is a wee bit of a raisiny sharpness to this one, but it's a lot more oily. That makes sense. It's not got so much of a sharpness to it. It's a big kind of oily sort of thing. There's a lot of really nice kind of big oily figgy qualities come out of the beer. You get, and as you move, you know, at the back of that front third of your palate, there's a wee bit of a sharper raisiny note, and as you go further forward, it's a wee bit of a kind of more figgy type quality. Then on the front half of that front third of your palate, you've got a wee bit of a kind of black curranty, and you get a wee bit of a more kind of soft black curranty type note out of it. Then on top of that, you've got a wee bit of a more oily blackberry type note. But yeah, for me, I really like this one. I actually really like this, and I think again it's me integrating more into Scandinavian society. I'm developing that kind of trademark love of licorice that you need to have to live here in Scandinavia. But I think this is a really well-rounded pastry stout in my mind. I like the pastry stouts that are a little bit more oily like this. I don't like the ones so much that are a bit drier. And I think that was the thing when we had the last one. I just felt that was maybe a bit dry, and it just didn't feel as kind of sweet and rounded from a pastry stout. You know, I want something a little bit more like what Amundsen do with their stouts. I want something to be a bit more thick and a bit more, a little bit more oily, and that's really what this beer delivers. So thumbs up to Brewski for this one. This is a lot better, I think, than the almond walnut caramel vanilla caramel. I don't know, the last one that I had. This one is quite a bit better than that in my opinion. So yeah, thumbs up to them for this. In terms of the mouthfeel, what would we say here? Very full-bodied beer, well, kind of bottom end to full-bodied. Yeah, bottom end to full-bodied. The carbonation is very, very smooth. It's got a real kind of slickness and oiliness to it, which is what you want from a beer like this. The malt base has a smoothness, an oiliness, and a sweetness to it. I like how this flavour develops. Very little IBUs to this beer, which, to be honest, is what you would expect from a pastry stout. You know, it's probably got like 10 IBUs, 15 or something like that. So yeah, definitely a little bit of that. Then you've got some really nice, big oily, fruity characters in there as well. So I really like how this one, this beer goes about its business. It gets a big, it does get a big thumbs up from me, actually. So yeah, I like what this beer I like what this beer gives, and so it's maybe, this could be my favourite one from the cake series so far. But yeah, I think maybe, I do wonder, because this is 12%, the last one we had was 10, maybe these beers need to be at 12% just to give you that big oily and kind of sweeter side of things that you would want from them. But yeah, I've enjoyed this one, so let's leave it there for this review. So this one was the Licorice Vanilla Cake, 12% Imperial Pastry Stout, from Brewski Mikrobryggeri in Helsingborg here in Skåne in the south of Sweden. Really nicely rounded beer. This one quite straight shooting in a lot of ways, but I think just really nicely executed. So yeah, let's leave it there. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Brewski. We will no doubt return to these guys at some point in the near future, but in the meantime, make sure you check out some of their beers, check out my other reviews from Brewski as well, and I'll catch you guys very, very soon. Slàinte, skål, cheers, and make sure you check out this brewery.